To start off Azon Overhaul, this introduction class again is going to be going over the entire series. I want to give you a walkthrough of what you can expect, and this is also going to help you prepare to do the actual work in this class. So I want to start out by talking about what exactly a site overhaul is. Then we're going to go into talking about when you should and shouldn't do an Azon overhaul to one of your websites. And then finally, we're going to go through the overview of the actual research and the work that this entire series is going to entail. And then finally, we're going to do a bit of a preparation lesson for next class. So to begin with, I want to talk about what exactly an overhaul is. The entire series, Azon Overhaul, is devoted to helping you do expansions on your websites. However, these expansions can come in a wide variety of different forms, and there can be a lot of different reasons for why you would or maybe would not want to do one of these expansions. I'm going to talk about the why and why not in just a few minutes. For now, though, I want to talk about what exactly a site overhaul is. To start with, most of these things here are different activities or types of work or changes or additions that you could be making to your website. So that's really what Azon Overhaul is about, is guiding you through all of these different changes or expansions that you might be making, but to help you do it in a smart manner, so you're not just blindly expanding your website. I have tried this myself blindly before, and I have even seen other people do it blindly before, and it really does not end out very well. You have to have a focused approach with a site overhaul, or else it will not end up successful. Now, some of the things that you might do to a website that you're overhauling could be things such as major structural changes. This would be where maybe you have a lot of different pages on your website, but there's not a lot of organization to them. This can actually be harming your search rankings. As a result, simply reorganizing and making structural changes to how those pages are laid out and presented and linked throughout your website can make a major difference with both search rankings and also how your visitors interact with your website. Some of these structural changes can also come into play as far as an expansion goes, something I'll be talking about here in a few minutes with new content categories. Before I get into that, though, I want to talk about content additions to existing pages. Every existing Amazon site that you have already has pages of content on it. And sometimes these pages may not be performing quite like you had expected them to. The point of expanding a page, adding much more in-depth content to that page, for example, can give you a major boost in the search rankings, but it can also help you to target new keyword phrases that your site is not currently targeting. Some websites will only change the existing pages when they're doing an overhaul. That's one of the important things to understand about a site overhaul and the whole Azon Overhaul series, is that You can do this in a variety of different ways or for a variety of different reasons. Some of those reasons might just be to try to make an unsuccessful site become successful. Maybe it's not getting the search rankings that you want it to. Maybe it's not converting traffic into sales. A lot of these cases, you may solely focus on expanding out the existing pages that you have on your website. And you may not have to worry about adding new pages or finding new products to promote. However, when you have a successful website that's getting traffic on a daily basis and converting a fair amount of that on a monthly basis at least into Amazon sales, you can still do some content additions to existing pages. However, you are definitely going to want to expand outside of that and start to create some new pages on your site. Start to advertise some new products. However, you can always take a really successful page and get much more in-depth with it so you can actually target a wider variety of different keyword phrases that all relate back to that same subject, whatever that page is currently covering. You want to reinforce that subject as much as you possibly can, talking about all the different aspects of it that you can possibly think of, because people are searching for this type of stuff. Even if you can't find data for it in, for example, the Google Keyword Planner, people will still search for these things and find your site as a result, as long as you have content there that is talking about those subjects. Now, I mentioned before that a successful website would most likely want to be expanding with new content. This could be things like your product review pages on your site. You could end up changing up the product ads that are on your site also. I want to talk about that for just a minute here, the product ad changes. Both types of websites can benefit from changing up the product ads that you currently have on your site. However, it's really going to depend on what exactly your site's situation is. And we're going to be doing a lot of focusing on that in the Azon Overhaul series so you can properly diagnose these situations and know whether or not you should be making changes to your ads, whether or not you should be expanding out existing pages or creating new pages, all these different aspects. A lot of the unsuccessful websites, though, will likely end up wanting to change their product ads, especially if you have traffic on your site and it's reaching your product pages, but that traffic is ultimately not converting into sales for you. We're going to learn how to diagnose these types of situations and learn how to fix them. And this, again, will be done with fairly simple product ad changes that we make on our website. Over the course of time, though, even a successful website, the products that it's promoting can become unsuccessful. They can stop converting because maybe that product becomes outdated. Maybe it's been replaced by a newer model, or maybe it's just not available on Amazon anymore. There's a bunch of different reasons why a product that was previously working and converting really great for you at some point in the future, even if it takes years for it to happen, may need to be revisited and modified. Now, besides making changes to your existing website and the product pages that are contained within it, a large part of site expansions, especially when dealing with successful websites, is going to involve the creation of new content and advertising pages. This could be informational content, and it can also be product review types of pages. On top of this, though, you have to organize any of this new content that you end up creating. So you also end up creating new content categories to go along with it. This organization helps search engine rankings, and it also helps your visitors to be able to navigate your site easier so they can find the information or the product reviews that they're actually looking for. Now, when it comes to adding this new content, sometimes an unsuccessful website may end up wanting to add some new content. It's really just going to kind of depend on what exactly the situation is with that site. Are the current keyword phrases that are being targeted still worthwhile to pursue, or was some kind of mistake made when those keyword selections were done and a complete overhaul of all of the content on that site might need to happen in order to make it successful? However, with your successful websites, as I mentioned before, you're almost always going to end up wanting to add some kind of new content to that site so you can increase the amount of keywords and the variety of those keywords that you are able to target in the search rankings. Now, these new content categories that I mentioned before, these are all about organization, making the site better for your visitors so they can find what they want, and also for search engine optimization. You don't want a website where you have a home page and that home page essentially links out to every other page that you have on that site. You want to arrange your pages in a bit of a hierarchy structure. So you have your home page at the top, and below it you have your content category pages. And then below those content category pages, you have individual informational or product review pages that are sorted within those categories. The linking that is done throughout your website relates to these categories. Wherever things are organized, that's how things are linked up, moving from your home page down through the category pages and into your content pages. As a result, when you sort your information properly, when you sort all the different pages into meaningful categories, you can end up with a really nice boost in search rankings as a result, because Google sees all these different individual areas of your site, and it can tell that they're all linking up together, so they're make their own little section of the website. And Google knows this stuff, and it ranks you much better by putting this kind of organization effort into it. So this is a major focus for doing any site overhaul, because you need to make sure you're maintaining this type of structure going forward, especially if you're expanding the number of pages that are on your site. So now the big question is really, when do you want to do a site overhaul? What is it useful for? When can it actually benefit your Amazon websites? Now, for unsuccessful websites, you ultimately don't have too horribly much to lose with doing an overhaul. The only thing you can really lose when overhauling an unsuccessful site is your time and your effort put into expanding that website. However, with a successful website, you do have to be careful with expansions, because you do have something to lose. If you have a site that's making even $50 a month, if you do an overhaul or an expansion blindly, you can easily end up destroying that. This comes back to the search rankings. Ultimately, that's what can be destroyed with a poorly done overhaul. You need your site to be expanded in a way that puts the focus on the niche that you're currently targeting. For example, if you had a website about a very specific type of car, maybe you have a website all about Ford Mustangs. If you decided to expand that website, you would want to make sure that all of the additional topics that you decide to cover on that site all have to do directly with Ford Mustangs. I consider that to be expanding downward within your niche. However, you can also expand upward, and this is actually something that you want to avoid entirely. Using the Ford Mustang example, if I looked at my website and I thought, okay, I have all of the content that I can really think of to create about Ford Mustangs, and I want to expand this website because it's doing really good. So what if I just started talking about other types of cars or just cars in general? Maybe I stayed within the Ford brand, but just started talking about other models besides the Mustang. While you may feel like this could be a good idea, this expansion upward away from your niche to make your niche more general can actually harm your pre-existing search rankings, because then your website is no longer about Ford Mustangs, it becomes about cars. And when compared against all the other websites that are about cars, there are many, many more of them, and the competition then becomes much stiffer. So you want to stay expanding within your closely defined niche, whatever your website is already about. Do not do any expansion outside of that. So with that said, I want to talk about a couple of specific situations where you would want to expand a site, where you would want to do an overhaul on it. The first of these is a website that has zero traffic. This type of a website is basically dead in the water. And I think this is pretty common among Amazon affiliates because it's easy to latch on to the idea of a website, and maybe you don't complete the website and so it's just sitting out there half finished, or maybe you've just tried some quick idea that you found from some special offer that you bought perhaps. Maybe you tried out some kind of a software and threw up an Amazon site really quick, and after it sat there for a while, it's still just doing absolutely nothing. Some of these types of websites can be fixed and even revived into being successful websites. However, you do want to do a little bit of research to ensure that this time isn't going to be completely wasted. I'm going to be teaching you guys a number of different methods that you can use to verify that Google has some kind of faith or respect in your website, even if it's not currently sending you any kind of traffic right now. This is really, really important because you need an indication as to whether you should proceed with trying to fix this website that's just dead in the water. A very big thing with this could be poor tactics that might have been used to promote Amazon products or to try to get search rankings. And sometimes Google can actually penalize or completely de-index a website as a result of something like this being done. So we're going to be checking on stuff like that to make sure that your website is not in that boat Because if that is the case, it is often just easier to move on to a fresh website and start over from scratch. However, if that is not the case, you can proceed on with that site and check some deeper things such as search engine rankings. Again, even if you're not getting traffic, you can often still find websites in the search rankings. If you're looking somewhere in the top 100 for keywords directly related to the pages that you have created on your site, you should be able to find yourself somewhere in the top 100 for at least some of the keywords that your site is trying to target. Even if you have to get a little more specific with those keyword phrases. For example, if you take the entire title of each page of your website and you go and you search that title on Google, and then you search through the top 10 pages of results on Google for that keyword, you should be able to find yourself somewhere in those rankings, even if it's down in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. It is still an indication that Google doesn't hate your site. It just lets you to realize that maybe you haven't done enough to obtain that ranking that you're trying to go after. Maybe there's more competition for that ranking than you thought there would be. Maybe it needs some more in-depth content. Maybe your content needs to be a little more varied. I guess what I mean by that is it's easy to talk about a subject, writing it out in an article. If you don't really know too much about that subject, you have a tendency to kind of repeat phrases over and over again instead of actually discussing that subject, instead of trying to teach things about it to people that are reading your website. These differences in how you can write up an article about one subject can be the difference between being in the top 10 and being number 50 or 60 or 70. So we're going to be diving into this type of stuff a lot to teach you how you can verify that there is potential in these websites before you actually proceed with doing the work to try to fix them. Now, another fairly similar situation is a site that has traffic, but it has either zero or very low sales compared to what that traffic level might be. A lot of websites like this are successful in the search rankings, but ultimately they're unsuccessful on the Amazon end of it. This is really the other main type of unsuccessful website that you're going to have that will also qualify for an Azon overhaul. With these websites, you're really right there with where you need to be. You're probably just missing a couple of minor details. You might not be promoting the right products. The ads might just not be in the right placement on your pages. Traffic might not be navigating through your site like you want it to be. There's a number of different reasons why that situation can happen. And again, we're going to be going over how to diagnose these problems and how to fix them in the Azon Overhaul series. Now, the next kind of situation where you might want to overhaul a website would be a site that is already successful and you want to make it better. A lot of times when you have an Amazon site that you've built, especially if you've built it using my Amazon tactics that I teach in other courses like Azon Masterclass or the Azon Home Study course or the Azon 30-Day Challenge. All these types of websites are fairly small basic websites. They're only about 20 pages in size. So they don't take a ton of effort to create them. However, when you put one of these up and it starts making money for you every month, you might wonder, can it do better than what it is currently doing? Not in all cases, but at least in some of these situations, you can take these successful websites and expand them to make them even more successful, to increase the traffic levels beyond what they already are, and to increase the monthly earnings on Amazon beyond what they already are. However, the main determining factor in whether or not you want to expand a site that is already making money actually has to do with whether you can expand up or down, like what I was talking about before. You need to be expanding to make your niche more specific. So you're focusing on whatever your website is already about, instead of being forced outside of your niche to talk about more generalized things. I have a real life situation for you guys that I want to talk to you about, having to do with one of these successful websites being expanded. This has to do with a website that I built back in 2010 called dogcratesizes.com. This was actually the original site that I shared publicly with other Amazon affiliates that kind of propelled me into teaching other people how to build Amazon sites and to even making software for people so they could build the ads on those websites. Well, I got so much interest in that website that I ended up selling it to somebody that was interested in it. After a while, that site was sitting there for years making decent money every month because it had a lot of #1 Google rankings and a ton of other top 10 Google rankings. I guess they decided at some point to try to expand it, and I was never consulted in that expansion. And in recent years, the website, while it hasn't disappeared from the rankings entirely, it doesn't have those strong rankings that it once held. After that expansion was done, a lot of those rankings simply dropped. Now, the reason why, after I investigated exactly what kind of an expansion happened on this website, I realized that they didn't expand within the niche. They didn't expand within dog crates. They expanded outside of it and started talking about more generalized dog stuff, other dog products besides dog crates, or maybe just content about dogs in general. While all of that stuff still relates to dogs, it caused the site to lose its focus on dog crates. And as a result, a lot of those search rankings that got downgraded were the ones that were specifically dealing with dog crates. So when you have a successful site, you have to make sure that you are expanding within your niche and not outside of it, or else this can seriously harm the already good position that that website is in. However, if you take care with your expansions on those successful sites, you're not going to run into this issue. You will achieve what you're setting out to do, which is to expand your keyword offerings. You won't be diluting your website any by doing that type of an expansion. Now, the other kind of a situation where you would potentially want to do an expansion to your website is a little different from the ones that I've already discussed. This one is something that could just randomly come about in your everyday life. Most of you probably watch TV or read news whether it's a newspaper or news online, or you absorb some kind of entertainment media that exists out there. As long as this entertainment media that you're exposed to is something that is reaching a massive number of people in the country, it is a potential source for this type of an approach that I'm about to talk to you about. This is an overhaul that you do not plan in advance. In your everyday life, as you're doing whatever you normally do, if you run upon something, say in the news or in a TV show, that directly has to do with your niche, pay attention to it. Do a little bit of research into that subject. It might be something that has just come about and it's just being announced or talked about, or it might be a new product that has just hit the market within your niche. Whatever the case may be, anything that's brand new can be a reason to jump over to your website and to do a quick expansion, even if it's just a little one-page expansion where you are putting up an article about whatever that topic is that relates to your niche and whatever it is you saw in that TV show or in the news or whatever. If you saw it on a TV show, quote the TV show by name. These types of things can lead to a massive influx of traffic if they're timed right, and if you can be among the first people to actually publish information about those subjects. One really great example of this that I still like to reference is when Steven Tyler did American Idol a number of years back. He all of a sudden started wearing these hair feather clips on each of the episodes of that show. And before you knew it, these things were everywhere, crazy popular. All the kids were wearing them. They were sold all throughout retail stores. But a week before Steven Tyler made his first appearance on that show wearing those hair feather clips, they were just a normal product that really did not get much focus from anyone except those directly interested in it. Simple little things like this, where your product or your niche is not even discussed on the show, just something that is thrust out there in the popular media, can cause your product to become overwhelmingly popular overnight. I guarantee you, the day after that American Idol episode, I guarantee people were searching on Google for things about Steven Tyler and hair feather clips and American Idol. You have an article on your site published the evening that that episode came out, and I guarantee you would have ended up with a lot of hair feather clip sales as a result if you had something that you could then direct people to on Amazon for whatever it is they were looking for. So while these types of expansions can't be planned ahead of time, keep your eye out for them for whatever different types of Amazon sites you run. And if you do see them come about, take a stab at it. Put up some content having to do with that subject, that news report, that new product, whatever the case may be. And at the very, very least, it'll help to add more content to your site to reinforce what your website is really about. But in a perfectly timed situation, it can result in much, much more. Now I want to go on to talk about when you should actually avoid an overhaul. The number one case where I would say don't even bother with doing an Azon overhaul is if your site was de-indexed by Google. If you used to get search traffic from Google and now you go to Google and you type in this search, sorry, I messed up my slide. You type in this search right here, site, colon, and whatever your domain is with the .com or .net ending, whatever the ending is on your domain name. If this returns 0 results on the Google search engine, then you might as well move on to a new site. It is possible to try to fix a site that has been indexed by Google. You can try to find out why they removed your site, and you can fix those problems, and you could resubmit your site to be indexed again, and then you can wait for all of that stuff to happen. Or you can simply just bypass a number of those steps and just start over from scratch. There's a pretty good chance if your site was de-indexed by Google, you would probably have to wipe out whatever was already there to begin with and start over from scratch anyways. So to not have to deal with those other issues of figuring out why they removed your site and submitting to be re-indexed by them, and potentially even suffering some penalties that might come along with them actually allowing you back in. It's hard to say whether they might penalize a site that they do allow to be re-indexed. It's just a lot easier to start over on one of those websites. Now, the other kind of a site that still has to do with Google, but maybe it hasn't been de-indexed, but maybe it's just been penalized in some way or another. We're going to be talking about how to diagnose some of these types of situations and whether or not it can be worth the effort of trying to fix them. Sometimes it can actually be pretty quick and easy to fix some Google problems that have caused your website to get a penalty in the search rankings. And other times it might just be easier to abandon the site and move on to a new one. Just one example, though, of something fairly simple that can be quickly fixed is if your website gets hacked and Google detects that there's malicious content on your site, they will penalize your site for something like that happening. However, you can detect these types of situations, and you can fairly quickly get these penalties removed by Google and be right back in the search rankings where you used to be. So again, some of these situations are very easy to fix, and some of them are not so much. And we'll be going into much more detail in the Azon Overhaul series about these individual cases and what to do about them. Now, the other kind of a site like this where you would want to just completely ditch it and move on would be a site that has been suspended by Amazon. Now, most likely, I don't think this would be the case with anyone that is watching this series. However, I still wanted to discuss it just in case this happened to be the case for one of you, or if it happens to be something that came up in the future for you. If Amazon either suspends one individual website or an entire affiliate account, personally, I would not want to have anything to do with that site anymore, at least not connected with my Amazon affiliate account, if it was still open after something like that. I have some people that have approached me, though, and they say, maybe they use some type of automated software and put up all these websites before they really knew what they were doing, and Amazon banned them. And they want to know, can they do anything with those websites that they have left over from it? They want to know if they could set up a new Amazon affiliate account, for example, and reuse those websites on that new account. Chances are doing something like that would probably be a fat waste of time. They would likely be able to detect very easily once you switched over to the new account that you did something like that, and then they would just probably shut that account down too. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that these sites have to be completely abandoned. If you do have a site that was penalized by Amazon that you could no longer use with that network, simply look for a different affiliate network to use. Something like CJ.com, Commission Junction, they have physical products just like Amazon does, and you can promote them for a commission just like you would on Amazon. So Amazon's not the only option that is out there. You could even do something like putting up Google ads on one of these sites and just simply monetize whatever traffic it might be receiving. Now, I know I've already mentioned this a number of times before, so I'm just briefly going to mention it here. Lack of relational content. How I have talked about expansions need to be done to intensify the focus on your niche, whatever your website is already about. If there's not really any more content that you can expand into that qualifies like this, if you would have no choice but to get more vague or to move upward with your new niche content, then you would want to avoid the overhaul. Again, referring back to the dog crate sizes example that I was giving you guys a few minutes before. Now, I want to talk for a few minutes about what you can expect in the Azon Overhaul series as far as what I'm going to be teaching you and the actual work that is involved with doing an overhaul on a website. This is really a two-part approach, as are pretty much all of my Amazon sites that I build. My overhauling works in a somewhat similar manner where I first start with research so I can plan out an approach and then I execute that approach. Well, with an overhaul, this whole research and planning phase becomes much, much more important, especially if you're dealing with a site that is already successful, because you need to make sure that that expansion is being done very carefully so you don't destroy any good that might already be in existence on that site. Now, to start out with, one of the things that we're going to be doing on any website that you're considering to overhaul is what I call a Google Love Check. The Google Love Check is going to be research that simply ensures you that Google has respect for your website. By verifying this type of a situation, you can give yourself the confidence that the new content that you publish on your site will be well accepted by Google and even put into the top of the search rankings in a fairly timely manner. This Google Love Check with a successful website is almost always going to yield positive results. It's really more of a question of whether there are topics that you can expand into when you are dealing with a successful website. However, with an unsuccessful site, this Google Love Check is super, super important because without being able to verify that Google Love for your site, the overhaul work may end up being a waste of time. Now, I mentioned that the successful websites are not really going to be as focused on that Google Love Check. They're really going to be more concerned with whether there are topics that they can expand into. This is the next point that I want to discuss here. You can obviously take the topics that you're already targeting on your site and try to expand on those targets even more, where maybe you just wrote a fairly simple article about one of your site topics, but maybe there was a lot more that you really could have done. Say a product review page. Maybe you just wrote a few hundred words, just a fairly general description about that product. You could have certainly gone into much more detail about all the different features that it has, or all the different uses or situations that it might be ideal for. There's all kinds of different stuff like that relating to the products that you're targeting or the current topics that you're already discussing on your website. And these can be really great expansion topics to do on your existing pages. However, you also have standalone topics that you can go after where you have keywords outside of those that you originally targeted on your website that are still a very close fit for your site. Maybe you left them out originally because you had too many choices of topics to cover. Maybe there are some new topics that have kind of sprung up over time having to do with your niche. Whatever the case may be, there are often a lot of these untapped keywords within a lot of the niches that we target on our websites. As long as you're not, again, going to be diluting your niche by this expansion. Now, the Amazon products are another type of research that we're actually going to be doing, where we need to ensure that the products we're already promoting are quality products. We need to make sure they're still selling on Amazon. We need to make sure that they're still converting traffic into sales on our website, for example, if it is a successful site. If not, you can end up needing to change the products that you promote on your site, or at least change how you go about promoting those products, just depending on what your research really reveals. Now, on the other side of that, you also have Amazon products that you're not currently promoting. They could be ones that you simply omitted in the beginning because a lot of times you can't pick every possible product that is out there for your niche, or it could be newer products that have come along since you originally created that site. You want to look through these different products and try to find some that would be a good fit for your expansion. These would be great for creating new product pages on your site. Once you can go through and verify the Google Love for your site to make sure that there are topics that you can expand into and Amazon products that you can expand into or revise on your site, you can then actually make a selection on a site to proceed with. Leading up to this point, this initial Google Love check and checking out your expansion topics and researching your Amazon products, it's possible you may need to repeat this section for a couple of different websites before you really find the ideal candidate for an expansion. You can then make your choice and then proceed and complete all of your expansion research, where you exhaust all the different topics and all the different products that you could possibly go over on that website before you end up making a finalized plan. Doing it this way, having just one site that you take past this point to do all of your research on, it can not only help to ensure that your expansions are more successful, but it can also help to ensure that you don't end up wasting a lot of time with them. There are a lot of the unsuccessful sites, again, that may not be able to be saved. And so this research phase is going to help us to weed out those bad candidates so we don't end up wasting our time there. Now, finally, we get to the actual work for our expansion. To begin with, we have to take all of our research that we've done and create a plan of attack that we can use. This plan of attack is going to essentially list out all the different things that we are wanting to complete on our site to accomplish this expansion. So this will be stuff like adding new subtopics to the existing pages on the website, creating new pages or new product pages or new category pages on the site, and sometimes even content that you would want to end up removing from your site. This could be entire pages. This could be sections of content. Maybe if you had some automated content that you had built into your site in the beginning and you wanted to replace it with some unique content. This could even be the simple removing and replacing of product advertising. So you're updating your ads with a more modern choice for something that you're trying to promote. In a lot of ways, though, as far as the new pages that you want to create on your site and the new topics that you want to cover on your existing pages, this expansion planning works a lot in the same way that it does to the way I plan my initial site construction project. So if you've gone through any of my other site building courses, how I teach you to plan out your site with keyword research and assigning a primary keyword phrase to each page, we'll again be doing that type of concept with these newer pages that we're creating or with some of these subtopics that we're going to be expanding into on our existing pages. However, this whole expansion plan will be more in-depth than the original plan was most likely for that website, because you do have not just new pages that you want to create, but a lot of times changes that you want to be making to your website on top of those additions. Now, once you have completed your plan, you can proceed with the actual work for your overhaul. This typically begins with writing the content that you're going to be publishing on your site. I'm also going to be talking to you in this series about outsourcing to have this content written for you by other people. Outsourcing is not something that is appealing to everyone. Not everyone has the budget for it, and some people just flat out don't want to outsource because they think they could write better content. That's quite okay if you want to write your own content. I typically do end up writing my own content. However, with a major website expansion, if you decide that you want to do something fairly drastic, if you decide you want to create 50 or 100 new pages on a site, it might take you a long time to manually go through and write all those pages yourself, whereas you could easily outsource and have that work completed in likely a week or two. So you don't have to do major expansions. A lot of times that's something that's just going to apply to your successful websites. whereas your unsuccessful websites are going to be doing more minor expansions and revisions on the site. So they would not really have much of a need for outsourcing. However, I still want to make sure I cover both aspects of that for you in this series, because I do think that outsourcing is a more likely possibility for these successful sites to use. Now, when you are doing the actual work on your website, as far as expanding it, we're going to be going through this in a couple of different steps to make this easy to understand and to also make it a lot easier to keep your work organized with doing these overhauls. This is going to start with overhauling any existing pages that you already have on your website. For the unsuccessful sites, that may be all of the overhaul work that they end up doing. It will, again, just kind of depend on what's going on with that individual site, something that will be figured out during the research phase. The overhaul work that we do on the existing pages, though, they can be a little bit different from the work that you do on the rest of the site, because here you'll be taking a page that already exists and you'll be editing it. You might be removing content, you might be adding new content to it, but it's not necessarily going to be content that is all plopped in one spot. For example, you might not just be plopping content into the end of all of these pages. It might be a paragraph here or a paragraph there, a paragraph up at the top, and a big chunk of an article down at the bottom. It'll just kind of depend on what you're trying to achieve with that site and that page, and whether or not there are any existing problems that you're trying to correct there. For this reason, the writing that you do for existing pages on your site may be easier to actually do on your live website as you're doing that writing. You could still order up outsourcing for this type of writing if you had very specific pieces of content that you knew you were going to need. You get this from your writer, and then you go through and manually insert it into your existing pages. For most people, though, that end up doing the writing themselves, it will be easier and faster to just edit those pages and to do those additions directly into those pages. For most of the other type of content that you create, though, it's going to be new pages that you're creating on your site. These could be new category pages or just new informational or product review pages. Regardless, though, a lot of these additional pages I find personally to be easier if I write out all my content in a notepad text file, and then I just simply go through my site and publish all of these pages. You're welcome to reverse this process if you want to and just do your content writing as you progress through your overhaul work. It will just kind of depend on your own personal preference and may even depend on how much overhauling you're going to be doing. Now with new sub-niche expansion, number 4 here, this is going to involve a large majority of the sites that decide they want to create new pages on the site. Unless those pages can be organized into the existing categories that you already have on your site, then you're going to end up needing to create new categories for them to be organized into. So some websites will have these new sub-niches that they're going to be expanding into, and others may not. A decent majority of the sites, though, unless you're only going to revise existing pages, you will have some kind of new page creation one way or another. It could be new informational pages. It could be new product review pages. Ultimately, though, the goal with creating these new pages is to expand into different kinds of keywords within your niche that you're not already going after. Whereas overhauling the existing pages is really more about expanding the keywords that you're targeting within that one limited topic of whatever that page is about. So let's say you have a page that's about a product on Amazon, and maybe you have a Google ranking for the name and the model of that product. But when people start searching specific stuff about that product or about features about the product, maybe your page doesn't show up in the rankings or it's not towards the top. You can then expand your in-page content to cover those different features and additional topics that might be commonly searched for having to do with your main topic. So these expansions help to accomplish different kinds of keyword targeting depending on whether it's relating to a topic that you're already going after or whether it just has some kind of direct relation to what your entire website is about. The entire Azon overhaul process helps you to go after these additional keywords. This is how you end up either reviving your dead website or causing your successful website to get much more traffic and much more sales than it already had. Now, the last thing that I'm going to end up teaching you in the Azon Overhaul series, this is going to be the very last class of this series, will be about what to do in the future website monitoring and maintenance. I'm going to teach you how to keep an eye on your site for years to come. You need to monitor search engines, especially Google, in my opinion, and also stats that you can get from your Amazon affiliate account. These two places or two companies can give you information that is absolutely vital to identifying these problems when they come up and to then be able to quickly fix them before it really ends up affecting your traffic or your sales too much. Sometimes this type of monitoring that you do to your website in the future can even end up leading to another overhaul that you do on your site. Although in most cases it should end up taking years for that to happen. Once you perform one of these overhauls on a website, you should be able to sit back and collect earnings from it for at least a couple of years. But still, it's during those couple of years that I recommend keeping an eye on your site. Take a look at the stats once a month and just double check to make sure everything is still running smoothly. This is how you help to maintain that performance going forward into the future. So I'm not only going to be helping you to fix or expand your websites, but I'm also going to be helping you to keep them going like that for as long as you continue to own them, and for as long as your niche continues to exist. Now, the last thing I want to talk about for tonight is a bit of a preparation for the next class. This isn't 100% required, but if you want to get a jump start on the next class, I would recommend going through these three things right here and coming up with a list of a couple of your best potential website candidates that you would want to use for an overhaul. To start with, just simply make a list of all of your different Amazon sites. If you have a ton of them, like I have, you may not want to make a list of every single one of them. Look at some of your best performing sites, if that's the case. And then also look at some of your worst performing sites. And then proceed on and do what I'm about to tell you with that particular list. That way you're not dealing with maybe not more than about 5 or 10 sites to go through this list of things here. First of all, figure out how much traffic and how much sales those sites are receiving on a monthly basis. And even look at a couple of months worth of a time period at the very least, just to get some kind of a generalized idea. I have some sites that performed amazingly well in December because of the holiday season, and in January they may have only made 25% of what that site made in December. So looking at something on a month-to-month basis, 1 month individually might give you an unclear picture. So make sure you are stepping outside of that initial just small snapshot of your site performance. Once you have your traffic and sales listed out for each of these sites, then I want you to go through this list and visit each of these websites in a browser yourself. Browse through the website, take a look at a couple of the different pages, the different products that you're promoting, the articles that you have written on that site, and especially the amount of information that is in them. Ask yourself these questions. Number one, are you only promoting a limited selection of products? This can be a really good indicator if maybe you've only picked out a couple of products within your niche. You could easily end up expanding with a much larger product selection. Number two, are your existing articles fairly simple, and could they be expanded with more in-depth information? This can lead you to expand your existing pages of your website to be able to target some additional keywords that relate to that specific page. These might be things like long tail keyword phrases. This is a great indication, though, as to whether or not there's more you should be doing. If you just have a 400 or 500 word article on your page and it's fairly vague in terms of really describing what that page is really about, that can be a great place to do an expansion. And number three, for unsuccessful sites, were there any shortcuts that you took the first time around that you could redo now? I'm really talking about things like automated software that created content for you, automated content, PLR content, anything that wouldn't really be unique to your website, something that could potentially be dragging down your search rankings even. These areas of your site, if you took a shortcut the first time around, an overhaul could be a great opportunity to address them and to fix them to ensure that they are not actually the problem. In fact, if you had a site that used to be successful, if it used to get traffic and sales, and at some point in the past couple of years it just simply stopped, that could actually be the reason why. It could have been because of some of those automated content shortcuts that a lot of Amazon affiliates were taking a couple of years ago, and it's coming back to haunt them nowadays. These three questions that I've gone over with you can just help to give you an indication just from examining your website as to whether or not something there could be improved. It doesn't necessarily mean that if none of these questions yielded any kind of expansion potential, it doesn't mean that there is no expansion potential. It just means that that potential may lie with completely new topics. That would be getting into the realm of creating new pages or maybe promoting brand new products on your site. So don't completely rule out a website just because you don't find anything when you're going through it during this step of the process. But look at everything as a whole. Look at the traffic for the site. Look at the sales for the site. Look at your answers to these three questions and whether or not there is some very obvious expansion potential for it. And try to narrow down your website choices to about one upwards of maybe three candidates for an overhaul. And bring these choices along with you for the next class. You will then be using these to start your research on in the Azon Overhaul series. I mentioned before that this is optional though, this preparation for the next class. If you just had an obvious couple of websites, maybe you only have a couple of websites, you may not need to go through this right now. You could still come to the first class with 5 or 10 different websites that you wanted to go through and to try to figure out which one was the best one to go after. That would be fine too. It's just going to end up involving more work if you try to take more than 1 to 3 sites through the initial research process to begin with. So that's why I'm recommending this little bit of trim down, just to get your mind focusing on a couple of particular websites before the next class begins. Let's see, Kelly was asking, I might have to backtrack into the lesson there with this section you were talking about. You said you have several sites in the number 2 category, and you were asking what kind of traffic was I talking about. I'm not 100% sure where I was in the training when you asked me that, Kelly, so if you could clarify on that for me, I'd be happy to cover that question for you now. And you're quite welcome for the PDF. I'm glad you enjoyed that and found it easier to concentrate on what I was going through. That is something that will be continued on throughout all the classes in this series. You'll have a little ebook guide to go along with it, so you can follow, even print it out like you've done, and make notes of your own if needed. So I'm very happy to hear that you're making use of that, Kelly, so thanks. Okay, so you have a number of successful sites getting a couple hundred visitors a day, but you think your best site is too general now. What I would really end up recommending, and you can even ask me more questions as we proceed to get more specific in this series about your sites and how you might want to try to apply this training. But it sounds like if you think you might have a site that's too general, my question would really be, where is your site currently seeing its success at when it's too general? It's obviously going to end up covering a wide variety of different topics if you say that it's too general. And so my question would be, which of those are really successful and which of them are not so successful? Especially when it has to do with the search rankings. Where is Google really giving you the most respect at? And it's that area that I would recommend focusing on with the future expansions that you do. And you'll be able to tap into additional keyword traffic that you're not already getting just by simply diving into that niche with more focus and covering a wider variety of topics within it. Okay, I see what you're saying. I won't mention your specific niche here, Kelly, in the live class, especially since these are recorded. I don't want any of my trainees with successful websites, especially, to end up having their niches overwhelmed by many other affiliates that end up watching my training. But just to talk about your situation without specifically mentioning what the niche is, even though all of your different topics are all over the map, they do still have a direct relation to what your whole website is about, which is indicated by your domain name there. So while there may not be a clear path as far as what the most popular thing is on that site, you can still look at those things in general and realize what kinds of things are popular that relate to my niche. Is it, with yours, for example, is it more the homemade do-it-yourself kind of projects? Is it things that, people just go out and they buy a little kit off of Amazon for? Whatever the case may be, there should be some kind of a clear divide there in your site as far as what's the most popular. Even if you weren't necessarily going after just the most popular things, though, still expanding within your fairly vague niche would be fine for your site, as long as you're already getting the results within that niche. Maybe you have expanded your site beyond, say, a basic 20 pages or so. If you already have 50 or 100 pages on your site, you might be, okay, yeah, you're up in the couple hundred, so you might be doing okay as far as Google goes with your niche, having that much content on your website. It sounds like you might be more wanting to focus on considering your site as an unsuccessful site, even though it is already successful. But just what I'll be teaching in this series for sites that are getting a lot of traffic and fairly low sales or no sales, I'd pay a lot of attention to those topics as we proceed. They will help you to investigate what your traffic is doing, what exactly is performing and not performing, to help you try to diagnose where you can make some of those changes to increase that performance. So you end up being able to convert a lot of that traffic into sales, like maybe the site is able to do now, but just maybe not very often. There's definitely a section in this series specifically devoted to that kind of a website. Yeah, diving into the most popular content on your site can really be an eye opener. A lot of times it's not what you end up expecting it to be. And even though there may not be more topics exactly like that one, if you can kind of understand how that topic relates to your niche as far as what kind of a topic it is, there might be other types of topics just like that, but they might deal with completely different subjects, and those could end up being equally just as popular. With, just as a wild example, some kind of a do-it-yourself project, for example, having to do with one kind of a do-it-yourself project, if there was anything else that could be covered as far as other kinds of do-it-yourself projects, then those could equally end up being just as popular as long as they still had that same niche focus that your original one did. Oh, you found a few of those. That's great. Hopefully, going through this series, Kelly will be able to help identify a couple of specific things that you can change around on your website to try to increase your conversion rates, and then maybe also to give you some more ideas for expansion in the future here as well, as far as other topics like that that you could expand into that might be equally just as popular. Let's see. Tina is asking, is there a way to work this plan with new sites? Yes, I absolutely remember you, Tina, and trying to fix your site for you. You're basically asking if have you started a site yet? Or is it a brand new website that was just completed, for example? To a certain extent, you do want a little bit of time to pass between the creation of a website and going through the Azon Overhaul series to do the research, because ultimately you will need some stats that you can go off of as far as Google traffic and Amazon stats, so you can get a gauge as to whether things should be changed or not and which direction to take with your expansion, especially. So to a certain extent, with a brand new website, let's say if you just completed it yesterday, at least for now, I probably would just take some notes for the future. If your site is complete, this is stuff you can still go into in the near future once you have, say, 2 or 3 months worth of Google and Amazon stats that you can look back upon and use it to make some educated decisions as far as what you should actually be doing with your site. Otherwise, you can end up blindly overhauling a website for eternity, basically, if you don't really have some concrete results to go off of. However, with that said, a lot of what I'm going to be teaching as far as expanding a website, the existing content that you already have, going into those pages and making them more robust and in-depth, that kind of a training should be really, really valuable, even for a brand new website. You could go back to your brand new website and ask yourself, okay, did I do my content in this way, or should I revisit it and go ahead and add more content back into it to make it more useful or more in-depth? Those kind of things could definitely be done immediately if you found that what was originally done on that site was a little bit lacking. As far as the expansion of brand new pages and brand new sections of content, and even things like switching out your Amazon products, things like that, I would definitely hold off a little while on until you have some kind of stats to make a good decision with. You're quite welcome, Tina. You're welcome as well, Kelly. Hope I answer the questions for both of you there. You're welcome as well for the PDF, Tina. Hope you're finding that useful. The PDFs going forward, I think are going to be a really useful guide for you guys with helping to summarize these lessons. I know that sitting through an hour or 2 hours worth of training, especially if it's something that's completely brand new to you, perhaps, can be very overwhelming. It's hard to remember the key points to it all. And so that was my intention with deciding to put together these PDFs for this series. And I'm very glad to hear that a couple of you are finding them useful already. And I will definitely continue that for this series. On the overall series, will I have help with speed for sites and with security? In general, I'm really not going to be going over too much having to do with that stuff, Tina. The security especially is actually a lesson I'll be adding into Team Azon Pro pretty soon. I believe you are over there on Team Azon Pro, if I'm not mistaken. Had a little bit of a delay with getting that posted up, but I hope to have that up in the next week or so. As far as site speed, I already have training available for that there. My biggest recommendation, though, as far as just for those of you that may not be in Team Azon Pro that want to make sure your sites keep running the fastest they possibly can, and also to help keep them secure. With speed, the biggest thing that you can do is to remove any unnecessary software that's on your site. We're talking about themes and plugins. It doesn't necessarily matter if they're still present on your site. They just can't be active. Otherwise, that code is going to be run. So you only want to have the plugins activated that you're actually going to be utilizing on any given site. I also highly recommend to cache your website content once you have your construction completed. Now, having to do with security, my number one recommendation with that is to delete those default WordPress themes. I've recently dealt with some WordPress security issues myself, and I found that was actually the way that they got into the sites that I had that were affected. I don't use the themes myself, but those default 2010, 2011, 13, 14, 15, and so on themes that they automatically include with WordPress, some of them do seem to have a vulnerability in them, and seems to be how people are getting into the website to load up additional files on them. So I found that by simply removing all the unnecessary software from your site, keeping WordPress up to date, and especially removing those default WordPress themes, which you have to go in and manually delete. You have to go into like your control panels, file manager, or log into your site using FTP and actually delete the 2010 or 2011 folders. You'll find them under WP content /themes/ and then the name of the theme, 2010, 2011, 2012, 13, 14, 15, so on. Delete all those, especially if you're not using them. I recommend to use the Weaver theme. So at least for a lot of my students, they're not already going to be using those default themes. Kelly is asking about two websites with HTML with WordPress blogs, how to change the site over. I'm assuming you mean to all WordPress. Yeah, I can imagine that would be a big pain. What I would really do, Tina, is to, sorry, that wasn't Tina, that was Kelly. What I would recommend to do, Kelly, is to open up the HTML version of your page. Look at just the actual page content. Ignore any sidebars or headers or menus or other stuff that you may have, and just select the in-page content of it. And you can either copy the text directly and just paste it into Pages manually to build up your site that way. You could also, in a lot of browsers, you can right-click and do like Inspect Element or View Source Code or something like that. And you could just directly copy the HTML, but not from the whole page, just from the content or article portion of the page. You may be able to copy that HTML straight over into WordPress. It would just kind of depend on how the site was originally made, what that HTML code was. Okay, you know how to change it all over. Not a problem. Yeah, it probably wouldn't be worth your time to change it over unless you have a really good reason to do so. If there were changes you wanted to be making on it, but maybe you found that it was really time consuming to do in the HTML version itself, it might just kind of depend on what your comfort level is with HTML coding. But yeah, if you're looking to get money going as quickly as possible, I probably wouldn't focus on that. I definitely focus more on the expansion side of it. If you're really talking about like as soon as possible money, like even money by the end of the week type of a thing, which is absolutely impossible with Amazon, unfortunately. You have to, earn the affiliate earnings and then wait for them to get paid out. Okay, gotcha. Money in 6 months. I was going to say you can always look into outsourcing. Pretty much anything that I teach with building your own Amazon sites, expanding content. This is training that the average, say, article writer does not possess. And when you can go out there and present yourself for online outsourcing jobs to just do simple article writing and stuff like that, you can get money in your pocket really, really quickly that way, and even use it as a supplemental source of income. Something that I did for years getting started with my online work while I was waiting for my affiliate sites to get more stabilized to produce regular income for me every month. Then when I had a bad month, I'd just go out there and do a little bit of extra work by writing up some articles for someone. Finding work on demand through freelancing websites is a really easy way to go about that. So even if it's not this week, 6 months rolls around and you're still not where you need to be, Kelly, check out freelancing. You might be able to at least help to supplement extra that you may need. Let's see, Jacob is asking about what your homework is for this week. I briefly went over this previously. Preparation for the next class is really just about looking through your existing Amazon sites and trying to narrow that down to a couple of potential candidates that you will at least consider for an overhaul. We're going to be doing, starting next class, research with these potential overhaul candidates that you come up with. So you don't have to try to do this work to narrow down a list of your own websites, but it'll certainly help you come next class, so you only have a couple of sites to focus on instead of potentially many more than that. It'll just kind of depend on how many existing sites you may already own as to whether or not this is really going to be important to do to prepare for next class.